So we're going to begin this section by talking about a definition for a linear function. A linear function is an equation that can be written in the form f of x is equal to mx plus b. Right? And I'm sure that you have seen this format for an equation at some point during another class. So I just want to remind you of what the letters stand for. So remember that the m is going to be the symbol that we're going to be using for slope. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So m is slope. All right, and then the b is going to be the symbol that we use for the y-intercept. And we'll talk about that as well. All right, so let's talk first about the slope. So slope in terms of a definition is the rate of change. Okay, maybe an easier definition for us to use is to say that the slope measures how steep the line is. So if you think about walking up a path, the slope would be the amount of the hill. Okay, how steep is the path? So a slope can either be positive or negative. If your line moves from a low point up towards a high point, then we say the slope is positive. If our line starts high and moves down, we say the slope is negative. Right? So we also want to remember that the y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So if you look at this picture that we have here, and you look at your line that's sort of in purple there, the line crosses the y-axis right here at 2. All right, now the y-intercept is a point, so you would come over and write for your y-intercept, it's the point 0, because we don't need to move over to the left or to the right any, and then up 2. And that would be our y-intercept point. So the first thing that we're going to work on is we want to be able to calculate the slope if you are given 2 points on the line. And so we have a formula that we can use to do that. And that formula says that slope is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So let's go ahead and look at our first example. We have the points negative 7, 14, and the point 11, 20. So the easiest thing that you can do with this is to go ahead and label each of your points. So this negative 7, 14, this is our first point. And we know that every point has an x and a y. So I'm going to label this x1 because it's the first point and it's the first x. And I'm going to label this y1. Again, first point, first y. The 11, 20 is our second point. So it's going to have the second x and the second y. Now the only reason I'm saying that we should do that is because the most common mistake I see students making is taking the wrong number and putting it in the wrong place in the formula. So if you have it labeled, hopefully you can avoid some of those mistakes. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is come to my formula, and in place of the y2, I'm going to erase the y2, and in its place, I'm going to put the 20. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing for the y1. All right, so I'm going to, in my formula, erase the y1, and in its place, I'm going to be putting 14. All right, so now we'll do the same thing on the bottom. So the x2, I'm going to erase the x2. And in its place, I'm going to put x2 is 11. And then I'm going to erase the x1. And in its place, I'm going to put -7. Now, you do need to be careful here. This subtraction is different than plugging in a -7. So it's like a minus, and then you have a -7. All right, so let's do some simplifying. On the top, 20 minus 14 is 6. You can use your calculator for any of this that you feel like you need it to. 11 minus -7, remember that we're going to make this a plus, and if we change this one to a plus, we're also going to change this one to a plus. So it's really the same thing as 11 plus 7, which would be 18. And then we're going to reduce that fraction. They're both divisible by 6. 6 goes into 6 once. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So our slope will be 1/3 for that first problem. All right, so let's do the same thing for our second problem. So I'm going to label again. Again, this is my first point, the 2,000 and the 48,000. So this is going to be x1 because it's the first x, and y1 because it's the first y. Our second point, 2,500 and 52,000, that's going to be my second x. And my second y. So now I'm ready to go ahead and plug into my formula. So in place of the y2, I'm just going to kind of write it this time out to the side. In place of the y2, I'm going to have the 52,000. In place of the y1, I'm going to have 48,000. All right, on the bottom for the x2, we're going to put in 2,500. And for the x1, we're going to put in 2,000. And then we're going to simplify. So 52,000 minus 48,000 is going to be 4,000. And on the bottom, 2,500 minus 2,000 is going to be 500. And so it looks like our slope here will be 8.